Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. Namo sadanto suche doye olahari sanmiao sanputoshi. Wu shang shen shen wei miao fa bai qian wan jie nan zao yu. 我今见闻得受持，愿觉如来真实义。Supreme, I'll give you a line. You give it back. Supreme and wondrous Dharma. Subtle and profound. Rarely is encountered, even in a billion eons. But now we see and hear it, and accept it reverently. May we truly understand the Buddha's actual meaning. Okay. 师父上人，各位师兄，大家阿弥陀佛。Venerable Master and Dharma friends, welcome to our Sutra lecture tonight. 7th ground of the 10 grounds. We're explaining the Flower Garland Sutra, line by line, chapter by chapter. And we are going to begin tonight, as we always do, by invoking the name of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas of the Flower Garland Assembly and the title of the sutra that we're studying. That's a time-honored way to begin a lecture, invoking spiritual presence. So we do it in Chinese, and you're welcome to listen in. You're welcome to join in. If you can read the Chinese characters, that's a way to plant them deeper in your consciousness. If you can read the ABCs, the romanization underneath, that'll give you the sounds. And let your ears hear your mouth pronouncing the sounds. It's quite amazing to use your apparatus to process words that have been in human consciousness for thousands and thousands of years in this form. Namo Da Fang Guang Fu Hua Yin Ji Hua Yin Hai Hui Po Pu Sa Namo Da Fang Guang Fu Hua Yin Ji Hua Yin Hai Hui Po Pu Sa Da Fang Guang Fu Hua Yin Ji Hua Yin Hai Hui Po Pu Sa 南无大方广佛华严经，华严海会佛菩萨。南无大方广佛华严经，华严海会佛菩萨。南无大方广佛华严经，华严海会佛菩萨。南无大方广佛华严经，华严海会佛菩萨。Page 58, 59. We're on the in the Chinese, the second paragraph that starts with Jie To Yue Pu Sa Yan. And on the English page, page 59, it's also paragraph 2. Welcome to the folks who are joining us online. We have our first team varsity tech crew bringing this webcast out to people streaming live and also archived for the future. So, Jerry, if there are any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to forward them. It's good. It doesn't poke. The other one pokes. Does it look funny to you? Nah, this one is that's really in there tight. So the other one is kind of irritating because every time I move it pokes and it takes my attention. This is nice. That's not a bug, it's a feature. Okay. Is it loud enough? Not really, huh? Yeah, a little louder, Jerry. Just not a lot louder, but a little louder. Yeah, a little bit more. There we go. That's good. That's the edge, yeah. Another notch, and then it starts to echo, and that's not good. Okay. So I'm going to read the Chinese, and people are invited to read along after me. I'll give you a line. It's call and response. Starts on the third line, which is the second paragraph. Here we go. Ready? 解脱乐菩萨言，佛子，此七地菩萨，为时然横，为时静横。Okay, over to the right. Let's read it together in unison. Here we go. Ready? Moon of liberation, Bodhisattva, ask. Disciples of the Buddha, are a bodhisattva's practices on the seventh ground defiled or pure? Okay. Crossroads in our text. Turning point. Choices. Bodhisattva who is learning about this part of the path from an expert is asking before he starts, before he actually sets off on the seventh ground, he wants to be clear about it. And everything that this bodhisattva has been hearing about the seventh ground is there's no referent. It's blue sky, it's open space. Because after this point, there's a change. And while, let's see, there's a change the way, what's it like? If someone has been a president and then they're no longer president, for the rest of their lives, they're introduced as President so-and-so. They don't stop being president, even though they're not in the office, in the chair. Forever after, they are president. The same with what? Captain, right? Captains never stop being captain, right? Senators never stop being senators. Generals are always introduced as General so-and-so, ever after. Okay? Lieutenant, colonel. Once you've had a rank, doctor, right? You don't stop being doctor once you get that professional title. Likewise, the bodhisattva here, once he or she crosses through the 7th ground to the 8th ground, 8, 9, and 10, they're different forever. And it's not just a title. They're really different. There has been a change. Consciousness and wisdom are very different at that point. They don't lose the function of consciousness, but they gain the function of wisdom as well. When you become a doctor, you don't lose the status of being a private citizen. You're still an ordinary non-doctor, right? But you have access to the title doctor and all of the ranks and privileges of that title, and one who has not achieved that title does not have those ranks, okay? So it's like that. Turning point, crossroads. Moon of Liberation says, disciple of the Buddha, he's talking to Vajra Treasury Bodhisattva. He says, are a bodhisattva's practices on the 7th ground defiled or pure? Okay. Now, somebody might blink. Do you mean to say a bodhisattva's practices on the 7th ground can be defiled? Or you could look at it as a question about the 7th ground, emphasize the 7th ground. Is it, we know they're defiled up to the 7th ground. What about the 7th ground? Now, defiled, think about that. Ran, here, stained would be good. Are these practices stained or are they pure, unstained? You could say it the same way, same question. Doesn't mean dirty, like falling off your bike on the grass and getting green stain on the knees of your blue jeans. It's not that kind of defiled. It's what? It's self is the dirt, quote, that would defile the practice. After the 8th ground, something happens that profoundly alters your view of yourself, of the self. Changes forever. Okay? So the question is, what about the 7th ground? We know up to there is the case. What about 7, 8, 9, 10? Okay, so far so good? 金刚藏菩萨言：佛子从初地至七地所行诸行，皆舍离烦恼业，以回向无上菩提故，分得平等道故，然未名为朝烦恼行。Vajra Treasury Bodhisattva answered, disciples of the Buddha, all bodhisattvas' practices from the 1st to the 7th ground are cultivated by letting go actions that lead to affliction. They make transference to unsurpassed bodhi, and they realize the impartial way according to their appropriate share. At this point, however, these cannot yet be called practices that transcend afflictions. Okay, that's a pretty dense response. That's a technical response, just like if you were cooking, if you were following a recipe, the recipe would say 2.5 cups of flour, right? The peel of 1 lemon, grated, right? And you'd follow step by step. This is a recipe answer. There's a technical answer. So here's a expert on the Bodhisattva path informing a newbie, but he's taking the role of a newbie on the Bodhisattva path to fill him in on what happens to you at this point. If you're cultivating along, fasten your seatbelt, because stuff's going to change. And you may not be ready for it if you don't have the information, if you're not prepared for what's going to come. Okay? Vajra Treasury Bodhisattva says, okay, disciples of the Buddha, all bodhisattva practices on the 10th grounds, on the 10 grounds in this whole course, from 1 to 7, heretofore, in other words, to this point, are cultivated by what? Look at this phrase. 皆舍离烦恼业 are all cultivated by getting rid of the karma of afflictions. Afflicted karma. Okay, stop. Translate that one. That's a power word. That's a really important term. What is getting rid of? What is afflicted? And what is karma? 3 important ideas here. What it means is everything that a bodhisattva does, let's pin it down. Let's say volunteering at the monastery. Let's say, okay, what's it like? You cook a casserole at home and you bring it over on Saturday because it's potluck for the monks and for the community. Okay? Pretty concrete. We can identify. We know what that's like. It's Saturday. We had lunch today. People did just that. Okay, that's a kind of cultivation. It's called generosity. It's called the giving of offerings. It's called supporting the monastery. It's called planting field of blessings, offering to the Sangha jewel, right? A lot of sanctioned Buddhist practice, first class cultivation in that action. Cooking a casserole, maybe it's got tomato sauce on the top and maybe some, what else? I'm not a cook, I won't pretend. So it's really yummy, delicious. You're bringing it in your dish, offer it. Okay. How does that connect with letting go of actions that lead to afflictions? You bring that dish in and you set it down, and somebody, some other person in the kitchen who's out there to cause trouble looks at your dish and goes, kind of small. Like that. Or looks at it and goes, you think the monks eat that? Right? Makes some sort of disparaging comment about your offering. Not to say that would ever happen at the Berkeley Monastery. That never happens at the Berkeley Monastery, right? Right? That never happens at the Berkeley. Let's say, suppose it did happen somewhere, in some monastery somewhere. You're at a crossroads. You can go one way or the other. You can get hot. Who are you to tell me that, fill in the blank? You can react to the insult. It's an attempt to get you afflicted by whoever says it. And your choice is to go ahead and get hot, come back, look at what that person brought to see if you can belittle it in turn, get some revenge. That's one way to go. That's one road, okay? And that definitely is affliction. You suddenly, what was a beautiful, generous, innocent, wholesome, virtuous act of planting blessings now becomes an opportunity to get hot. Right? Fighting, greed, seeking, selfishness. Okay. Choice 2, at that moment, somebody makes a belittling comment about your beautiful offering. Choice 2 is to go, hi, my name is so-and-so. Are you having a bad day? Or, yeah, it is kind of small, isn't it? Maybe together we could make it a little bigger. Or, oh, yeah, well, thank you for the comment. I hope you find dishes that please you today. I hope you find something you like to eat. I'm sure the Sangha will find this is just right. You have asbestos in your nature, and it's fireproof. You don't get angry in the least. In fact, you look at the person who made that disparaging comment, and you recognize that that comment says a lot more about that person than it does about the dish, the casserole, the food that you offer. Right? Has nothing to do with the casserole. It's somebody who doesn't know the basics of cultivation and is shooting out, finding things outside to set fire to, like a dragon. Right? Had nothing to do with the food that you brought. It could have been anybody who set their dish down, and they would have found something equally nasty to say about it, because why? They were afflicted. And that's unawakened behavior when you're afflicted, is to shoot out at somebody else, to share the misery. Misery loves company. You know that phrase? Is there a Chinese equivalent for misery loves company? Probably we could find, I'm sure there is. Misery loves company. If you're upset, you're much happier if two people can be upset instead of just you, right? So let me get somebody else miserable. Misery loves company. Really good English language, 成语, right? That's an English language idiom. Misery loves company. Anybody know off the bat? Nan. Nan, xiong nan di. The older brother in trouble looks for the younger brother to. It looks, yeah, comrades in misery or something like that. Nan xiong nan di. 什么？什么？ Whoa, look at this. That was quick. Under 60 seconds. Let's give 5 points to Google. What was it? 同病相病相连 connect 同病 same illness connects 同病相连 pretty good. Anybody else, Jerry? Tell them to type it in on chat box. You can pass it on. Good. So we've got 凶 let's see. What was it? Not 难凶难地 and 同病相连. Good. Misery loves company. Unawake. To just pass it on to somebody else, right? It's hard to be patient when things aren't going well. It's hard to just take it when things aren't going well. The tendency is to set fire to things around you. It's not your casserole that's the problem. That's choice 2, right? Now, in a community like that, it's so easy for one afflicted person to set the entire forest on fire by just going around and saying something nasty. Number one person takes the left-hand fork of the road and gets nasty back, and then there's 2 people upset, and then it just spreads and spreads and spreads. And the food doesn't taste very good at that point. You've ruined your lunch right at that point. Okay, ordinary world stuff. In a community of people who are, even people who are related to each other, do this kind of thing. You totally do it to your brother, your mom, your son, your daughter, your sister. You don't dare do it to your boss, but the boss can do it to you, right? Do it to your dog. You kick the dog, scold the dog, and the dog is like, they forget it really fast. Dogs are very forgiving. That's why they get kicked a lot. But it's better if you can say, oh, yeah, maybe I'll just save all the affliction and not say anything except 随喜, joyfully support others' goodness. That's hard to do. That's real cultivation. Okay, the Bodhisattva cultivates all his practices by letting go of afflicted karma. Vajra Treasury says, can you do that? Can you be asbestos and not catch on fire? That's what bodhisattvas do. Notice how much this teaching has to do with relationships. That was one of my big awarenesses this last year teaching at Bond University. I was trying so hard to get the Bodhisattva path boiled down to the essentials, to communicate it to 20-year-olds who were going to hear me for 2 hours, maybe watch a movie, read a book, but never again. There was no more teaching to be done, essentially, in the Bodhisattva path. That was it. This was their only chance, my only chance. And I could present the precepts and Guanyin Bodhisattva and deep samadhi but I'd give 5 minutes to each topic and move on if I was going to try to cover it comprehensively. And as I kept discarding topics and discarding. I had one day and I had a slideshow to create, and I couldn't get the essence of it. And as I was looking, particularly at the precepts, why was that so important? And the 6 guidelines and all, why was that the foundation? And I realized that in the Mahayana tradition, in our northern tradition, it's about relationships. Cultivation is defined in community, not in hermitages, not as a soloist, not as a loner in a cave, in the forest, in a cabin on the lake. It's defined when you don't kill, that's another person, relationship. Let's start the relationship on life-giving, nurturing, not on killing. Relationship. Who do you steal from? Somebody. There's your relationship. You're the thief. They're the victim. Oops. Right? Relationship. What about sexual misconduct? Relationship. What about lying? You don't lie to empty space. I mean, you can. But you lie to people. Relationship. Now, drinking or intoxication, imbibing substances, is self-medicating, right? But then it's the wisdom that you have now occluded. You've now put stuff in your bloodstream that makes every decision you make at sea. Like that. So you could say it's relationships. So from the precepts on, what about the paramitas? Giving to someone. Precepts, again, patience under insult, vigor in teaching, samadhi so that you can enter the world and not be confused, and then wisdom, which is expedient wisdom, meant to teach. Every step of it is relationships. It's all based on how I behave with others, virtuously or with affliction. Right? So here it is again. Right? The Bodhisattva cultivates letting go affliction. Okay, why is that important? Let's look at the letting go word. It's not cultivating getting stuff. That's really key. And if we can get that understanding, we will have made a big step into this version of what the Buddha taught. You can go to lots and lots and lots of Buddhist communities, teachers, groups, and you will hear promises of stuff you're going to get, often from the teacher himself, from the charismatic teacher. And initiation, anointing the crown, a wisdom mantra, right? And the subtext that you don't know about is, and the headaches that go along with that can only be relieved by the teacher after you pay him to relieve the headache after he anointed your crown. Kid you not. I know I've received the phone calls from people who've been anointed and hexed at the same time. So that's another story. It doesn't always have to be that black, nasty. Often it's just a promise that you're going to get enlightened or the third dhyana by Christmas, and here's your certificate. Oh, you got it. You're now the third dhyana holder. Buddhist groups that offer the certificate. Okay, in this tradition, we don't promise getting stuff. What does it say? Wu zhi yi wu de. In fact, there's nothing to get. In fact, there's nothing to know. Why? That sounds so un-American. That's not a marketplace promise. It's because progress in this tradition is made by subtraction. You remove things off the Buddha nature that is already bright and awake. Afflicted karma covers that nature. Somebody insults your casserole and you're upset. You catch fire. By doing that, guess what? Your Buddha nature is covered over another layer, another layer, another layer, which at some point has to be unpacked if you're going to make progress in this description. Now, I don't want to say this is the only description of cultivation or the only way to get to the Buddha nature. Of course not. This is what our Chan school, as represented by Master Hua and Master Empty Cloud, his teacher, brings forward from the Buddha's teachings. That's what I get out of the Avatamsaka Sutra. Sure, you get enlightened, but you get enlightened by removing what covers the light. It's not that you add light at any point ever. You never get light, right? You remove the layers of stuff over something that's bright like the sun, or they say 10,000 suns, the Buddha nature. Standing next to a teacher who's gone down this road is kind of like getting sunburned. You really feel like you kind of really radiant. Sure, I'm burning up, And when he scolds you with that energy, it's like you feel like you have a laser beam on your nature. And when he would never praise his disciples, but when when Shifu would turn it on to tell a story, when he was teaching, you would feel the sun, this benign, benevolent, nurturing light. So, how interesting, right? That's what's saying here. You let go of afflicted behavior. 烦恼业, 舍离诸烦恼业. Okay? That's how you make progress. You refuse to catch fire. You become asbestos. And the key is patience. Patience is the Dharma. So all of these practices came one by one through recognizing that cultivation works by removing covers. Number one cover, me, the self. Number two cover, mine, the stuff that I draw to me to support the me. Me and mine, 我所有, you say, right? The self and what pertains to the self. The Bodhisattva to the seventh ground has been really vigorously grinding off the self, the layers of self, but there's still enough there that it's still, quote, defiled. The self is still there. Okay? Why fight at first of the 6 guidelines? Because you have something to defend. Me. I want that stuff. You can't have it. I'm going to fight you. What holds the self there? Greed. That stuff is I want me, for me. Give me more. It's my share. I want mine and I want yours too. Right? Why do we seek? Because the self is in there feeling needy. So I'm not content. I want more. Go out and grab it. Self-benefit. Right? There it is right there. Self and what supports it. And then dishonesty, why lie? Cover the self. You feel slightly insufficient. You cover. Tell the story. Okay, 6 guidelines all have to do with covering over the nature. If we don't do those, we yield, we're generous, we're content, we're unselfish, we benefit others, and we're true, the self takes a hit. The self goes away to that degree. Do it a long time, nothing more to get because you're home. And all of this works internally. There's not a bit of this that works by looking out. Looking outside, you cannot remove the covers from your nature. So, interesting, huh? Relationships and removing afflictions. Those are really key to what we do. And it's a hard sell in the world. Why? It's not glamorous. There's nothing to see. There's nothing to sell. So, next, what? 以回上回向无上菩提故. They do something else here. This is pure Mahayana Avatamsaka Dharma, which is the condition that we transfer the merit to Bodhi, to unsurpassed Bodhi. There are other chapters where it says you transfer to Pure Lands. 愿以此功德庄严佛净土. It's in our verse. May we transfer all this merit to make magnificent the Buddha's Pure Land. What is it? It's Samantabhadra's last vow. After you do all the 9 things that he tells us to do, the last thing, there's our Bodhisattva, Samantabhadra. He's on the elephant. That's him, right there. After all the other cultivation, the last step is to give it away. By giving it away, you make connections with those who receive what you give away. How do you give it away? Here, it's you give it away to Buddhahood. So I transfer now so that in the future, Buddhahood is accomplishable. So I can make it to Buddhahood. Can you make it to Buddhahood without that? Not Wushang Puti, not Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, not the Buddha's highest. You can get to a nirvana, which is a samadhi. Right? There are nirvanas for voice hearers, solitary Buddhas, which are not Wushang Puti, highest Bodhi. This sounds picky, right? If the Avatamsaka Sutra didn't explain it, we wouldn't know. This is a textbook. Okay, so listen here. This is really interesting. Tomorrow night, I will be up at City of 10,000 Buddhas, as I am every Sunday night when I'm in the country. And I'm explaining the 10 transferences chapters, Shi Hui Xiangping. I've been explaining the 10 transferences chapter for maybe 8 years now, a long time. It's a long chapter, and I only do it, once a week for 90 minutes. So it's never old. It's amazing how that chapter just keeps opening and opening and opening, and yet it explains one method only, transference. Samantabhadra's 10th vow. And I say the same formula, I vary it so it sounds slightly different. And then I say it once in English, then I have to repeat everything I say in Mandarin. But I won't do that tonight. I'm going to switch to Japanese instead. So what I say is, here are the benefits of transference. One is, you give with your mind. And it's like giving with your hands. Right? But you give with your mind, and it's called giving of Dharma. Fa Bu Shi. They say of the 3 kinds of giving of Dharma is the finest kind. There's giving of material, wealth stuff, giving of courage, fearlessness, and there's a giving of Dharma. Here's the giving of Dharma. You say, all the good stuff that accrued to me for doing good, I now give it away. So you are practicing giving. Practicing giving is a wholesome thing. Number one, it makes you happy. Two, every time you give real stuff away, merit, virtue, blessings, good roots, you give away with it a piece of the self that wants that stuff. Like everybody wants, you want things. We want stuff. What if I give it all away? I won't have anything, right? So when you give with your mind, by transference, you give a piece of the self that wants stuff away. So the self diminishes every single time. That's good, right? You have less self every time you do. 3, the more you do it, the better you get at doing it. The more you do it, the more you can do it, right? From the first transference, the Bodhisattva's pretty essential transference vows, and the chapter is all these vows, vow after vow, 10 by 10 by 10 by 10. It goes on and on and on. And at the first, it's pretty simple, may all beings become Buddhas together. That's not simple, but it's essential vow, right? Where we are now in the sixth transference, the transference vows are really, I don't want to say ornate. That sounds like, needless. They're beautiful vows. May all living beings receive the fullness of this merit. May they all become adorned. May they all become magnificent with a bodhisattva's wisdom, fully enabling them to teach and transform others in turn. So the vow, it's like, I'm going to give all this merit, and the wish that is that all the beings who get it will then themselves go on to become givers of Dharma. So it's like, it's a functioning vow. It's a vow with parts, like that. Very neat. Okay, number 4 is what? So the more you give, the better you get at it. That's number 3. Number 4 is, when you transfer this merit, the beings who receive it remember. Now, it's invisible. It's in the Fa Shen Hui Ming, the Dharma body and the wisdom life, this wonderful phrase, where this action is happening. You don't see, if you had your eyes open, you could probably see the merit going out, I suspect. People would be radiating, right? Goodness. But the beings who are in your broadcast range, think of a radio station. How far does KQED go? Can you get in a boat starting out the Golden Gate? I can still hear KQED 50 miles out. I can still hear KQ 100 miles out. It's getting a little weaker. It's gone. Maybe KQED goes 200 miles into the ocean. Who knows, right? You use your mind the very same way. All beings within my broadcast radius, may they all receive equal amounts of my merit and virtue that I'm giving. And then, because I have this benevolent relationship, I'm a benefactor to them. I have somebody I can cross over to become a Buddha. Okay? The benefit of giving to living beings is now you've got a Shan Yuan. You have a Fa Yuan. You have a wholesome Dharma relationship with living beings. And in the future, they'll go, oh, hey, you look familiar. Why is that? Oh, I kind of like you a little bit. Invisibly, they recognize it's true. Okay, hold that idea. That's number 4 benefit, right? What is the Bodhi resolve? Remember the Bodhi resolve. That key to the Avatamsaka and the key to the Mahayana is, ultimately I want to become a Buddha. Immediately I'm going to do it by, quote, Du Zhongsheng, Hua Zhongsheng, taking living beings across. That's how I'm going to get the Bodhi resolve. What if you don't have any living beings to cross over? How are you going to hua zhongsheng, take them across? It's hard, you know. What if you've been transferring merit and you have all these wholesome affinities on all sides, people who you've benefited with your gifts of transference? When you decide you're going to you're strong enough in Dharma and wholesome in goodness to take living beings across, all these affinities are there waiting for you because you've been transferring. And the ultimate Buddhahood of the Bodhi resolve is realizable. It's possible. That's why bodhisattvas have to guang jie shan yuan, have to make wholesome connections with living beings as much as they can, every opportunity. Transference is the way you do it. One way you do it. Do it vigorously. Okay? So, in the basketball court in, take your pick, Ibao, right? Malaysia. Mabo, Muar, Malaysia. Petaling Jaya, Kota Baru, Kota Kinabalu, wherever you are, Terengganu. In Malaysia, we follow Sherfu into this basketball court, you know, it's got a Buddha image and it's where we just lectured. And Sherfu would go down, we'd put a chair, he would sit on the jump circle, you know, in the center of the court, and people would line up, cross the free throw, under the basket, out the door to come and bow to him. And we'd be standing behind Sherfu, you know, and kind of watching. 250 people in some small town in Malaysia come and bow to Sherfu. Happened in Taiwan. It's the same. And Sherfu would say, why do you think they're bowing to me? Well, I don't know, Sherfu, because they see your light, Sherfu. He said, nah, what light? Do you see my light? No, Sherfu. You know, don't put on airs. He would say, maybe they're bowing to me because when I was at home from age 10, I bowed 830 times in the morning, 830 times at night to all living beings and transferred the merit. Maybe they're just returning my bows. Do you think? I don't know, Sherfu. So, what's going, you know, what is this? There's something, obviously something more than meets the eye going on here. When you take your mind, this is rufa, according to the Dharma, and say, I now transfer this merit with the wish that all living beings, or whoever, fill in the blank, do fill in the blank. That's the transference wish. And then you let it go. Okay, that's 4. Number 5 is that you are turning your life and your mind towards Dharma practice, and the mind can't simultaneously hold hateful thoughts and giving thoughts. The more you transfer, the fewer your negative thoughts are. And pretty soon, let's say you're on a BART train and you've got beads in your hand and you're reciting the Buddha's name, Guan Yin's name, the Great Compassion Mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum, constantly, you can keep transferring constantly. Pretty soon, your mind becomes this tower of goodness. Your nasty thoughts have no room left. They go away. Your mind cleans up through the practice of transference. So there you go. I mean, that's a bunch of powerful benefits from this one practice of Weixiang, transferring merit and virtue. And if you ask the Theravada monks, do you transfer merit? The answer would be not in exactly the same way, but yes. May the goodness that arises from my practice be to the sun and the moon and all virtuous leaders of the world, to the highest gods and evil forces. May all receive the blessings of my life. Right? didn't memorize it exactly. Sorry, but it's got that's here. There it is, right there. That's a chant that you do after meritorious stuff. May all these beings, the sun and the moon, and all virtuous leaders of the worlds, even the Lord of Death, you transfer to King Yama, right? May all receive the blessings of my life. Okay, there it is. The Mahayana takes that and articulates it and puts it in your hands. Samantabhadra says, yeah, this is necessary, right? This is the last vow of the 10. And if you do this, you will become a Buddha. By taking living beings across, beings whom you have established shanyuan, good connections with, by the giving with your mind. Right? You get better at it as you do it. You give yourself away, the negativity shrinks as the positivity continues. There's just no room for the nastiness to stand after you transfer a lot. And you pick up wholesome connections with people. People go, yeah. You look, Jerry. Okay, that's it. May I transfer merit that I cultivate on behalf of someone else, such as my mom, for example. Yeah, that's nothing will stop you from doing that. Certainly that's not, quote, illegal to do that. The question would be yeah, there are I've heard examples in the sutras of people doing that. Master Hua, for example, bowed on behalf of evil people because they wouldn't know to bow on their own, right? Shifu bowed to teachers whom he hadn't met yet. He hadn't met her, she was too young, but he knew he was going to have teachers, so he bowed and kind of laid a stash of merit and virtue for it that was going to time lapse, kind of like that, time capsule type. So you can tailor your transference any way you want. Bow on behalf of your mother. The question would be, what if your mom doesn't want it and she's a Christian? And, for example, maybe you're the Christian and she's the Buddhist, whatever. You can do that, certainly, and it's a wholesome thing to do. Certainly, quote, no harm done. How much goodness happens? The Earth Store Sutra says, or no, the Earth Store says 1/7, right? Ulambana Sutra talks about the gearing down of the merit and virtue, how much actual transfers. So the vows in the Avatamsaka 10 Transferences chapter get very beautifully crafted vows. You can hear the way they're, like I gave you an example, you transfer merit so that others will have merit to transfer to become bodhisattvas themselves. So probably yes, no harm done. You can go, how would you judge whether your mom is moved closer to cultivation that she wouldn't do herself otherwise? I don't know. Certainly it's a good wish. It's a filial wish, and no harm done. Anybody have an opinion on that? What do you think? Jinchuan? Can you transfer, Jinho, can you transfer on behalf of your other relatives? Does that make sense? Jin Fosher, anybody? Hold on. Anybody? I won't put you on the spot unless you have a comment. So.
I've always thought of transference more as an intention. It lays the foundation for why we're doing the practice.
Just speak up a little bit.
It lays the foundation for why we're doing the practice, and then we remind ourselves why we're doing it. Say to to our own pure land or to become a Buddha. So I guess when we transfer on behalf of our parents, that there's definitely a a connection between the person and his mom, and I guess that's also one step towards purifying, hopefully, the relationship, like how Rama Master stayed by his mother's grave for 3 years. That would certainly help in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Comment?
I was just thinking how when you like in the Earth Store Sutra, it says only 1/7%
Speak up, please, a little
one
louder.
1/7% of the I guess merit goes to the other person, and I'm thinking maybe it has to do with like when you're reciting, the vibration of that recitation is the process. The vibration goes through you and your own body and mind, and the other person can only receive so much of that, or 1/7, because it's like your own body and mind that's doing that work. So I'm thinking maybe that vibration can entirely transfer.
Maybe what?
Maybe that vibration, that force can't entirely transfer, because that process, that systematizing, I don't know, like your mind's the one that systematizes it. Like maybe if you transfer it, like the whole, I don't know how to really explain it, but anyways,
Here, okay. All right.
yeah, it works out in my head, but I just don't know how to word it.
So here's one way to think about it. What if all of the transference is done inside and there's no actual radiating outside like a broadcast tower? What if you're transferring to the father connection in you and the mother part of you that is your mom, which is most of you, and your father, which is most of you? Maybe you're making some sort of neural connection to through the Puman, the universal door in your own mind. How about that? Now, I don't know. I don't know. But it would make sense that the entire process, as I transfer, that I'm lighting up parts inside, or to my Dharma body, where I actually connect to all living beings. And the more I do it, the more the stronger those neurons or energy paths go. Sandy?
I think for the person who started this question, I would think about where this is coming from. Is it coming from a place of fear? Fearing something about your parents, or judgment, somehow they're inferior, or I would think about those blocks. Certainly those things block your mind more than, oh, does a seventh of this transfer, only a seventh, or the technicality of that. I would look at where that's coming from, and I would look at the question of faith. So we can get really technical, like chemistry, and go into metaphysics, but I think if the basic things aren't addressed, for me, I just see them as blockages.
But for you, what?
I just see them as blockages, walls.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now look at how far we have come in this. Before I met the Dharma, hold on, Michael. Just hold it. Yeah. Okay. Who did? Up above. Okay, Simon. Hold on 1 second, Simon. Before, can you hang on 1 sec? Okay. Before I heard any of this, I took part in a Catholic mass, and I don't know if this is universal in Mass, but I was very impressed by what was called petitionary prayer. I think David might be our resource person for this. Is that always done? Part of the Mass, right? Okay. So after the sacraments and the Eucharist, as the host has been around, just before they end, I don't have the formula, but the priest who is officiating at the Mass says, let us now be mindful of, or let us now keep in mind those who are not as fortunate as we are, and maybe that usually, if I recognize the priest's craft in there. They usually had one or two names, and they would say, Jim Parker, who has always been part of this community for the last 30 years, is now had some unfortunate health, and let us pray. And what is the formula, David? Lord, hear our prayer is the response. What's the first one? What do you say? What's the formula? You say, God. There's a formula that has the power. Wait. I'm asking David.
It's okay. You're right.
Okay, Sandy, what is it?
Well, you just rhyme and say, my neighbor Brown is,
Sick.
broke his leg, and then somebody would say the words of prayer.
No, there's two. There's pray something. Lord, hear our prayer. Anyway, so petitionary prayer. What you do is then the priest he will say one or two. Then he opens it up. Does anyone have someone for whom we should pray? Okay, and people around the room will say so and so. My neighbor, my grandmother, my mom, something. And every time a name comes up, there's a formula. People say, Lord, hear our prayer. And it's a transference using prayer as the vehicle to send out good healing energy. And it's done, in the Mass where the light has been called and there's spiritual presence, and it's a very powerful moment. And I was like, wow, that's really nice. Why don't we do that? Why haven't we done that? This is before I learned about transference. Then when I heard about transference and realized how central this is to the Bodhisattva path, notice everything that if you spent one day in our monastery, everything we do is concluded with transference, right? The meal, the chanting, may every living being, our lectures, everything is concluded with transference. So we're not alone in saying that this is a good thing to do. Okay, Simon?
Generally, sometimes it's just from my own experience that if I want to make a wish, and I'm going to be nice to people as a transference. So then if I go to work, so because other transference, and whenever state's coming up, so you kind of transference our or the wish state and remind you that whatever people remind you need nice and without carry through into the next action. But sometimes it gets easier, so that's fine.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. The more you do it, the more your mind moves towards benevolence. It's amazing how people pick up on what we're sending out. If we're in the habit of sending out beneficial thoughts, wholesome thoughts, being nice to people, people pick up on it. If we're in the habit of finding fault and criticizing and being afraid of people and reacting negatively and judging, people pick up on it and respond in kind. It's really true. Animals so strongly pick up on what we're sending out. And we have, in the Gold Coast, we have a snake catcher, Tony Harrison and his wife, Brooke. And the two of them, they probably, on the average, 5 or 6 snakes a day. They're called out to go drive all over the Gold Coast and pull pythons out of the rafters and get green tree snakes out from behind the refrigerator, and occasionally find the eastern brown, which is the world's second most venomous reptile. And so he takes a little GoPro camera and films himself and his wife as they're doing it. Now they're taking their 2-year-old son along, and the boy like, you know. So Tony occasionally explains how easy it's not. It looks really easy, what he's doing. It is not easy. And what you notice is, when, particularly his wife, Brooke, she's absolutely as vigorous as he is. When they see a snake, they go right up to the snake and pick it up like this. And they'll make a comment, oh, this one's it's had a bad day, or this one's kind of cranky. But they'll say that about 1 out of 10 snakes, and the other 9, instantly the snake is calm. And these are carpet pythons that are 6 feet long, and they'll be holding it like this, and sometimes petting it and talking to the people, and then they put it in a bag and wrap it up and take it out far away and let it go. After registering it, when they caught it, what variety snake, they have to tell the government with every snake they catch. So it's so interesting to see reptiles that most of us, I saw my own live python, and I was like, I was in the air before my mind registered that my eyes had seen the snake jumping backwards. I was afraid of it, It's a live, big carpet python on my deck. And after what I realized, the snake looked back at me, and the snake was kind of like, oh, you're just one of those people, all right, And it just kind of moved off, slowly off under the deck, and in 30 seconds it was gone. Luckily, I had my camera in my hand. But what I see with this expert is he has learned to communicate no fear to the snakes. The snakes are not afraid. If the snake is cranky, if the snake bites or is cranky, it's because the snake was frightened, or is about to lay eggs, or is shedding its skin, or is in some sort of a state. And you can see the personalities of the snakes. And some species are just mean. The eastern brown snake will track humans. It's aggressively pursuing people it doesn't like. The other snakes all try to get away, but the eastern brown is and they're deadly venomous. So anyway, our minds communicate, and like Simon was saying, it's, if you remember to be kind, people pick up on it. The fact that I have to say this seems kind of disingenuous, right? Because shouldn't it be obvious? If we eat onions, we smell like onions, right? If we think mean, we vibrate mean, and people sense it. So far, so good. Now, we got transference to unsurpassed Bodhi. What else? 分得平等道故. And they receive, here, 分得, they section, share, 得, receive, 平等, impartial Dao, therefore. So the impartial Dao means progress along the Bodhisattva path. And in other words, each of these bodhisattvas, wherever they are on the first to the 7th ground, they make progress as is appropriate. this is kind of a euphemism, right? The Pingdang Dao, the impartial way. They make progress along the Buddha's path according to what they've done. That's what I get out of that sentence. Okay? So they realize the impartial way according to what is owed them, based on what they did, what they've earned, you could say. Okay? Right? Any further comments on that one? Okay. Ran Wei Ming Chao Fan Nao Heng. However, from the 1st to the 7th, and on the 7th, they still have not transcended. They haven't got to the practices that don't create affliction. Trouble-free practices. Okay, whoa, and before this, like, who knew there were trouble-free practices? Suddenly there's a new element introduced here. This is technical talk. Okay, what would this be? We were at a public talk with Master Hua. It might have been San Francisco State. And here was Shifu in a classroom, because Professor Epstein, Ron Epstein, was a professor of philosophy, professor in the philosophy department at SF State for many, many, many years. He would regularly invite Shifu over to lecture. And Shifu would always take the disciples, and we did this many times. And here's Master Hua, sitting in a molded plastic chair, beaming at all the students. And the students are like, "Who's this? He's obviously not enrolled. This is not a classmate. He must be a teacher." And occasionally, Ron's colleagues would come in. Professor Needleman, Michael Krasny, or professors who taught there. I didn't see them in the classroom, but there were quite a lot of illustrious faculty at State, Ron's colleagues. And occasionally they would come in with knowledge of Buddhism, too. So one day, I forget who, and there would be a better story if I remembered who it was, but this distinguished guest said, "Venerable sir," he said, "are you enlightened?" There's the question, right? Now, if somebody, depending on your intention when you ask that question, Master Hua would answer with, more or less impact. He would pound you with a question like that. And he had a lot of humorous responses to that. And this day, because the questioner was genuine and probably didn't have other language, he wasn't trying to test his own level of enlightenment. He wasn't out to put Shifu down. It wasn't a loaded question. None of those. It was an honest question. Shifu answered, 我没有烦恼. I don't have any afflictions. And that question, that response could be, you could hear that as a throwaway, but given the situation and the power of that response, I have been chewing on it ever since. I don't have any afflictions. Okay, what are afflictions? They accrue to the self. If you have the slightest portion of the self, you'll still have afflictions. 7th stage bodhisattvas still do have a 我相, 我见, the hallmark of self, the characteristics of self. They're still there. They haven't erased them entirely. So they still have afflictions to this point. At this point, however, these cannot yet be called practices that transcend affliction. So Shifu is saying, I don't have any afflictions. 我没有烦恼. You could also say, I've got no troubles. My troubles are over. That's another way to translate Womeofan now. My troubles are over. Afflictions is not a word that we ordinarily use, right? Klesha. I don't have any klesha left because there's nothing in my nature that catches stuff, that hooks it. No more hooks. So what does that mean? That's the answer to, are you enlightened? I don't have any afflictions, said Sherpa, to that one question. Now, another questioner asking the very same question, another person, could have gotten the lion's roar back. Are you enlightened? Why do you ask? A stupid question like that. What does enlightenment mean to you? Sherpa could have come back a million ways to pound the person, just to show that that was a bogus question. The person had no idea what he was asking, but they wanted to show themselves as being clever for asking such a good question. He didn't. Like, no affliction. Interesting, huh? So, up to the 7th stage, including the 7th stage, bodhisattvas still have practices that include affliction, i.e., defiled practices. But the self is going to pretty quickly wear thin right here. That's how hard it is to get rid of the self. Right? It's this, and now, question, is it the same as the ego? Nope. But we're looking at in the same direction. It'd be easy to try to plug in Western psychology's language here. Are we talking about the ego, big ego? Are we talking about egoism? What are we talking about here? Well, it's difficult to make one-to-one comparisons, so I pretty much don't. But if you know what ego is, you pretty much have a clue of what the rough self is. Somebody who has not much of an attachment to their ego is pretty easygoing, hard to insult, right? Pretty broad-minded. We're in the same direction. We're looking at the right place. But I'm going to be really careful at saying ego and self in the Buddhist definition are the same. But pretty much, that's what's going on here. Okay, yes, no, interesting? So, textbook, talking about what happens when you get to the 7th ground. Boy, the last ground, the 6th ground was all about ignorance, conditions, activities, conditions. It was all this new language talking about this subtle, invisible, but really powerful force of creation in each of us. 12 links pulling reality into being, determining your birth and death. And the Bodhisattva, we patiently went through it. It's all this strange phrasing, right? And the Bodhisattva went through emptiness and got to 7. And at 7, started talking about teaching and emptiness and emptying that out so that expediently the Bodhisattva could show up and teach. And then what? Disappear? Where does a transformation go after its work is done? Having no self, roughly gone, so that you can appear in all these different ways when you need to, when the time is right. That's tricky because your reality is, you have to be able to negotiate all these different realities. Very interesting how this works. Okie doke. Next week, we find out about elephants. Elephants next week. We run into a bodhisattva's elephant. Samantabhadra's elephant. Is the elephant that Samantabhadra rides the same as the elephant that the wheel-turning Sage King rides? Is that the same elephant as the one that Chakra rides? And if you look closely on the rear end of the elephant, would it say Subaru on the back? Subaru Forester. I named my Forester after the wheel-turning king's elephant. Uh-oh. People are starting to catch my moves here. So there are elephants in heaven. There are space-traveling elephants in the Buddha Dharma. What? Right? Somebody should do, here's a good master's thesis for you, somebody should do a thesis on animals in the Dharma. Lions, elephants, 四不像, dragons, lots of dragons. Fascinating, right? 天龙八部, why not? Check it out. My professor at Franciscan School of Theology, Bill Short, had done so for Christianity. He had an entire book on Christian bestiary, all the animals that appear in from pagan times up. And around Christmas time, you know what we get to watch? We get to watch the new Harry Potter world film called something Diggory's Cedric Dick. No, what's the name of the film? The Fantastic. What is it? The Fantastical Beasts. Yeah. J.K. Rowling's new film is about. I've forgotten his name. It's the hero and his. Yeah. It's all about. It's supposed to be. It's been well reviewed. It hasn't been released. It's coming up probably Christmas season. So that's of course, the Harry Potter world. But next week we have elephants popping up in the sutra. So interesting. They all have stories. There are amazing stories behind the elephants in the sutra. Yuhan, you have a comment?
Yeah, Omitofu Fashi. Go back to the beginning of the lecture. You mentioned about the English idiom, misery,
About
love
the which?
company.
The which?
Misery loves company.
Misery loves company.
Actually, there is a Chinese idiom perfectly match this English idiom. It calls 祸不单行. The disaster don't singly walk. They don't walk alone. So I think this match the misery. Yeah.
Not for sure. Because why? Bad things come in threes. That's bad things come in threes. That's not exactly misery loves company.
I see.
So thank you for the proposal, but I'm going to up you one. Bad things come in threes. 祸不单行. Right? This is slightly different. This is, if you're feeling upset, chances are you're going to try to get somebody else upset. Because why? You don't want to be upset alone. Okay? But that's good. We're expanding our collection of idioms. Yeah, 祸不单行. Bad things come in threes. So, yeah, good. Appreciate that. I said I'm going to give a couple announcements now. And one is everybody's got to vote. My name is Heng Sure, and I approve of this message. Got to vote. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for, but you got to vote. Don't not vote. Okay? It's really important. And pretty much the outcome in Northern California is assured. But nationally, those votes count. So we don't want to have things happen just because we were casual and assumed an outcome. That's not wise. Master Hua, I was telling the story today about when I, at Gold Mountain Monastery, following instructions from my teacher, organized a political candidates forum for the mayor's election in San Francisco. We got 9 candidates into Gold Mountain Monastery on separate nights to campaign for mayor. to give their speeches. Quite a scene. Just amazing. And Dianne Feinstein came in as a candidate for mayor and lost to George Moscone. Shifu came down to give a prediction to George Moscone. George Moscone heard it and danced in the street. He recognized Shifu as the equivalent of his archbishop, cardinal, pope. He saw, because George Moscone was a devout Catholic, and he saw in Shifu someone he recognized. He was thrilled to get the prediction. Shifu said, "You were late for the talk. Don't be late to be mayor. You have a chance," he said. Moscone was just thrilled. So after the forum, he wrote back and said, this is before the election. He wrote back and said, "I just wanted to thank you all for having us in." He said, as candidates for governor, for mayor, we have to go to all these different neighborhood forums. I probably went to 3 dozen. And he said, often it's somebody's living room. And there can be 6 people in there, all voting for someone else, but they brought you in just to grill you, And he said, your group was one of the most active and warm and receptive, welcoming groups of anyone in the entire campaign. Thank you so much. And I was like flabbergasted, because our monks and nuns, while he was giving his talk, were there going, Namo Mino, Namo Mino, Namo Mino, Namo Mino, Namo Mino. And most of them didn't speak English, And so, by golly. And then he sent us 2 tickets to the inaugural ball. And I got the tickets, phone rings, John Shifu? Any letters? I said, yeah, Shifu, we got tickets to the politician's ball. Ha, ha, ha. You should go, says Shifu. Shifu, you should go. You invited him. It's like, but Shifu, I was just telling it you should go. So I went to the inaugural ball and watched the Sharks take a bite out of George Moscone to the extent that they supported him. Everybody claimed their piece of the candidate now that he won. And I was watching this process and smelling the cigar smoke. And I thought, I'm really glad I left home. This is no longer my scene. Some decision happened as I was sitting there in the top row of the balconies at City Hall, watching this brutal political process of, bargains made and bargains kept, and promises made and promises broken, and everybody like cutting up the candidate, their piece of the pie, how much influence they won. And when I got back to Gold Mountain, I walked with Bhikshu Hengguan, back from City Hall to Gold Mountain Monastery. And got in the door, and here was Master Hua standing in the door. And he looked at me right in the eye and said, "You want to go be mayor?" I said, "No, Shifu, I really want to be a monk." And he said, like that, and went back to lecture. That was like, was this whole thing to teach me about my attachment to popularity? In high school, I was a student council president and found that kind of thing very easy to do. And obviously that's a shi qi, that was a habit from the past. And somehow I had to see all of that before Shifu that was a test for me. Talk about expedient teachings. And then 2 years later, bowing in Pescadero, having someone come out early in the morning with the mist on and just it was winter, and it was icy dew. Somebody came out and said, "We have bad news. Mayor Moscone has been shot, along with Harvey Milk." Dan Brown, this person taking a gun, Dan White had shot Moscone, and then got off because of the Twinkie defense. He had been eating Twinkies, and the sugar in the Twinkies had given him temporary insanity. So anyway, bit of San Francisco history. And The point of that all is to say we do take part in the political process. We do. Otherwise, if you say, oh no, we don't let ourselves get polluted by that, well, if that is true, you should never ever complain about the impact of any policy on your life, because you, by not voting, allowed the ones who won to win, and your voice was not counted or heard. So you lost all your authority to ever complain about anything that, any law, that should come down to influence you. So go make your voice heard. Vote your heart. Okay, that's one. Number two is tomorrow we have an event here that I want folks to know about, and it's a Guqin concert. Guqin, this is not a Guqin. This is the guitar. It's not even related to the Guqin. The Guqin is a 7-stringed Chinese lute, zither, tabletop lute. It's 3,000 years old. It has been in constant play since the time of Confucius and before. Confucius himself carried and played a Guqin. It was 5 strings back then, the pentatonic scale. Now it's 7. And it's very wonderful and also very suitable for a monastery because this guitar is very slippery. Because it's meditative. The Guqin has a quality of vibration. There's no frets whatsoever. It's just the bare wood. It's like a cello. Bare wood and fingers, like a violin. So those vibrations go and go and go and go in the Guqin. And they evoke a resonance in your nature. It's really quite wonderful. People quickly go to sleep when they hear the Guqin, to the point where there's a monk in Beijing who performed with his students for us just 3 months ago now. And you remember, Jin Chuan Shi, one of the first things he said before he performed was, if you feel an urge to go to sleep, go right ahead. He said, this may happen in the first 5 minutes, he said. And he made it okay for people to quietly just sink into it, because the Guqin it has that very wonderful. And I myself am now finally able to play a piece or two on the Guqin, and I'm learning it's really not simple to get that technique, but it's very rewarding. And you don't dance to Guqin music, but you can enter samadhi to Guqin music. And David Wong, our local teacher, is one of the very few who has brought the Guqin to the U.S. to protect it in a real way, to keep it going, to keep it alive. Because it's so not exciting and not flashy that in China, young people are not rushing to pick up the Guqin, although there is a renaissance in China as well. But in the U.S., David is well respected as a real scholar of the Guqin, and he plays. He's a good performer. And 6 of our colleagues are going to, how many? 6 from the monastery, right, Suzanne? 6 of our friends from the monastery have become students of David's and are now coming tomorrow to perform. So 3 p.m. here at the monastery. We're not going to broadcast it, are we? Any chance to webcast it? Anybody up for it? I don't know. No excitement. That would be nice to get it out there. They had a concert last year, and David says this is much improved in November. There's going to be a chance to do that. Okay, shall we transfer the merit? Aha, that sounds familiar. Transferring merit. Now's our chance to do it. Use your mind, all the goodness that you care to give. If you don't want to give it, keep it, but it doesn't go very far. It benefits you and nobody else. Transfer your merit with the wish that what? Who are you giving it to? What's your wish? Please make that wish. We're moving Samantabhadra's practices into the West with a guitar and a melody in English. May every living be our minds as one and radiant with light. Share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may our minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light break the darkness of their endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Alrighty. Now, I was mentioned the last couple of weeks that there was, we'd kind of, with Bob Dylan's Nobel Prize nomination, which he has agreed to accept, by the way. That was, we heard one opinion that he had said no. Somebody told us that on Tuesday night, but in fact, what Bob Dylan said was something like, well, what do you know about that? I think that was his comment. I will definitely be delighted to go to Stockholm to receive it. So Bob did accept his Nobel Prize. We've been singing Bob Dylan songs, and last week I sang Puff the Magic Dragon, and Where Have All the Flowers Gone, to give people a sense of some of the wealth of songs that are out there called folk music, and that was my particular heritage, and I want to share them. I don't want to keep them buried forever. So here's one, Satisfied Mind. People know this. This is a found Buddhist song. This is one of the most Buddhist songs I've heard, and it was not written as a Buddhist song, but it's a universal virtue of contentment. How many times have you heard someone say, I had his money, do things my way, but little they know, so hard to find. One rich man in 10 with a satisfied mind. You can change the pronoun as you like. One rich woman in 10 works just the same way. Once I was winning fortune and fame. Had all that I needed to make a start in life's game. Then suddenly it happened. I lost every dime. But now I'm richer by far, satisfied mind. 'Cause money won't buy back your youth when it's old, or a friend or a loved one, a heart that's grown cold. The wealthiest person is a pauper at times, compared to the one with a satisfied mind. When my life is ended, my time's run out, all my friends and my loved ones, I leave them no doubt. But there's one thing for certain, when it comes my time, I'll leave this old world with a satisfied mind. Don't you wish all Buddhist songs could be just like that? It's such a good song. Now, that's not a sing-along unless you know it. So I didn't want to quit until we invited you all to sing. And we're going to sing Name that tune. You all picked it out, right? Interesting. Huh. Namo Guan Shi Yin Bodhisattva. Namo Guan Shi Yin Bodhisattva. Namo. Let's slow it down a little bit. A little too excited. We don't want to get excited reciting Guan Yin's name. Namo Guan Shi Yin Bodhisattva. 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 Guan 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 Yin Bodhisattva. Guanyin Bodhisattva, 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 Guanyin Bodhisattva. Namo Guan Shi Yin Pusa. Namo Guan Yin Bodhisattva. Right? Not. Okay, notice how that is not this tune. There we go. That's the Taiwanese version. Namo Guan Shi Yin Pusa. Namo Guan Shi Yin Pusa. Right? You know there are 3 different melodies for Guan Yin Pusa. Namo Guan Shi Yin Pusa. That's pretty much our CTDB version, right? Right? Now, what's different? Namo Guan Shi Yin Pusa. Namo crossroads, Guan Shi, or Namo Guan Shi Yin. One goes down, one goes up. There are 3 ways to do it. So, here's the movement. Let me see. That's why I changed my pitch. Namo Guan Shi Yin Bodhisattva. Namo Guan Shi Yin. That's the lower one. Okay? It's on the Guan. Namo Guan Shi Yin. Versus Namo Guan Shi Yin Bodhisattva. Namo Guan Shi Yin. Right? One goes Guan. One goes Guan Shi Yin. So what we've learned to do, interestingly, is wait for the leader to line out the tune, and then we all follow. Right? If somebody says, okay, here's an example. At the DRBA board meetings, we always start our board meeting with 3 Namo Guan Shi Yin Pusas, 3 half bows, and then we recite Guan Yin's name. And everybody waits for the leader to indicate which of the 3 tunes they're going to do. And everybody's so used to doing all 3 that we just automatically pick wherever they lead us. Usually it's da da dee da 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 da. Right? So the available notes are all here. Da da dee da 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 da. Sometimes the leader goes, Namo Guan Shi Yin Pusa. Namo Guan Shi Yin Pusa. Next round. Da da da. Right? Sometimes they go da da. Namo Guan Shi Yin Pusa. Namo Guan Shi Yin Pusa. The problem with number 3 is if you have men's and women's voices together, pretty soon the pitch goes run, and then it goes run, and then it goes run, and pretty soon you're all going nah. Right? It's just the way it is. Voices are like that, you know. So it's nice. That's one of the benefits of the Taiwanese version. Da da dee da 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 da. Because it ends up. It carries you up. It drops less. Okay, you understand? So, because we are not going pusa, we're going bodhisattva, so we cut off that first one. We don't do. We can't go. Because we got sattva to say, right? Bodhisattva na. Automatically we're in the last one of the other two, not that first one. So Namo Guan Shu Yin Bodhisattva, Namo Guan Shu Yin Bodhisattva na. How about that? So Guanyin Bodhisattva comes to the west in the banjo. Kind of catchy, you know. That keeps you going down the road. Namo Guan Shu Yin Bodhisattva na. Kind of keeps on moving. It's very nice, very yang and bright. Okay, announcements, comments.
I was just looking at the calendar, and actually November 12th and 13th, we're planning on having an Amitabha weekend here at Berkeley Monastery. So that's just only 2 weeks from now. So if people would like to come for an Amitabha session, we start at 8 a.m. on Saturday with the 8 precepts, and it goes to about 5 p.m. And on Sunday, also we start at 8 a.m. and goes to 5 p.m. But we're only transmitting the 8 precepts on Saturday. In addition, I believe this week we're going to have Buddhism for the Modern Mind on Monday, and our regular classes Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday are all still happening here at Berkeley Monastery. Otherwise, is there anything else that I'm missing? No?
Buddhism for the Modern Mind?
Yeah, Buddhism for Modern Mind's on Monday. Sorry? November 6th? No, November 12th and 13th. Sunday? The walking meditation. Yeah, all day walking Amitabha walking meditation is going to be November 6th. So you can recite all day on Sunday next week as well, if you would like. And then the following week, we can do an all weekend recitation. Yeah.
Okay, today was class number 2 of our Learning Chinese Through Buddhist Ceremonies and Learning Calligraphy at the same time class. And boy, was it fun. I mean, you could just hear the noise coming up through the dining hall. It's great. Good energy. And how many students today, Jin Fosher? More than 20?
More than 20, probably.
Probably 20 plus.
People.
So that class is really exciting. Learning Chinese, learning to read Chinese characters using the sutras and the ceremonies as our teaching materials, and at the same time, learning them through Chinese calligraphy, which is a wonderful study all by itself.
Also, Jing Fosher tells the stories behind the ceremonies. So today he was telling the story behind Liu Shangzan, which I've never heard before.
Oh,
That's very interesting.
You summarize it.
He only told the first quarter of the story, so he had to run a cliffhanger.
Oh,
It's a very complicated family soap opera to start it with brothers hating brothers and so on and so forth. So, well, next week he says he's going to tell us why Liu Shangzan came about from that story.
Sounds good. Anything else? Hayomeo. Jerry, how many folks online today? 40. Stay here. Don't. I don't want to lose you online. Okay, lose you too online. Wow, that sounds like fun. Let's go online. After the lecture, watch it again. Learn the song. Learn Satisfied Mind. Watch again. So you can decide what are defiled practices. How could the Bodhisattva practice defiled practices? It's that the self is still there. And the afflictions still accrue because they're hooks. They're hooking stuff. What does that mean? Okay, let's all bow and wish that the rain continues. Have you seen the photographs from the air of the lakes and the reservoirs from 2012 to 2016, 2011 to 2016? The Chronicle and the online SF Gate had 12 of California's reservoirs. 2011, same flyover picture. 2016, recently. I really get ready before you view those. Don't view them casually. They will shock you. A lake that was this big is now that big. And this is where our drinking water comes from. Rivers that were abundant are now like 1/5 of the size they were. The reservoirs at the moment, according to the article, are 46% full from normal. So we have half the water that we would have had before the drought. This is drought year number 6. And it is conceivable that California could dry up and go without water, have no water. We're thinking, terror. We're thinking about earthquakes. What if very quietly, very, gradually, the number one terror happened, which was we ran out of water. Anyway, it's in today's sfgate.com. 12 of our water resources from 2011 to 2016, and they're just. When I saw the pictures, I couldn't keep clicking because it was just too grim, to see what's left. A little bit. Boy, oh boy. So as we bow, we can transfer. May all living beings have abundant water to fill your needs, necessities. Whatever karma is keeping the dragons from doing their work, let's erase that karma so the dragons can deliver the water they're supposed to. OK， 是道之尽，非道在对，在善而从，不善而改。Bow in respect to the Venerable Master. Namo